This is a Fox News alert. We continue to follow the breaking news out of Oregon. 3 Mount Hood hikers missing for more than a week, lost in treacherous conditions, hurricane-level winds and blizzard conditions. Hope remained alive for all 3 despite the time that had passed and the violent weather. But that hope turned to disappointment for one family today. One hiker found dead, alone, in a snow cave. The whereabouts of the other 2 hikers is unknown at this hour, but the searchers are doing all they can to find them and find them quickly. Time is of the essence. It's Matthew Weaver. Matthew is a former Portland mountain rescuer. He has performed search and rescues like the one going on right now on Mount Hood. Matthew, huge disappointment, to put it gently, tonight with the news, at least one body found, but there is the chance the other 2 are still alive. What are the biggest challenges these search and rescuers are facing?
Well, the biggest challenge is that assuming that they found the person today who was in the snow cave, the other 2, if the news reports are correct, that they left and tried to get help, they could literally be anywhere on the mountain. And you have to understand, with the Cascade volcanoes, it's a cone. The farther you go down from the summit, the larger the search area gets, and it's really difficult to cover that kind of territory. You know, the helicopters do a great job, but if they've dug themselves into a snow cave and are somehow incapacitated, it's going to take human beings on the ground to get them.
Is it sort of almost like a glacier-covered mountain, so that there could be crevasses where they could even fall into? Is it that type of danger as well?
Yes, definitely. There's a number of glaciers on the mountain, and if they had gone down the south side, the chances of a glacier being involved are a lot less than on the north side. But had they descended the north side to their car, or at least trying to get to their car, there are plenty of glaciers that they could have met with at that point, yes.
And explain the danger to the viewers, you know, what the real danger of running into those is.
Well, the crevasses on Mount Hood are nothing like, you know, Everest. They're not 100 feet deep or anything. In places, they can be definitely 20 to 50 feet deep, and if you fall into one of those, it could be deadly, most definitely.
Is there water rushing underneath some of them, though? Some of these, so that, like, if you fall into one and you almost get caught in a stream underneath?
Well, this time of year, it's so cold up there, the water is not rushing. If this were in the summertime, there is water rushing under the glaciers, but I highly doubt, with the temperatures that we've had this week, that there's a lot of running water right now.
In terms of the air search here, is that I mean, it seems to me that would be the most effective. You get the helicopters and you just keep, you know, weaving back and forth. Is that that's the best way to do this?
Well, the hope would be that if they are in a snow cave or somewhere in the timberline, they would be able to signal the rescue helicopters. The only other way the helicopters would help is with the infrared vision, and if they are holed up, there's a chance. I don't really know enough about infrared vision, but I would assume that the snow would be kind of causing that not to get their heat signals.
If you're in a snow cave, I imagine you have pretty much enclosed to contain the environment to make it, you know, as warm and safe as possible. Does that impede your ability to hear the helicopters then, you know, to hear the search, so that, you know, when they come by, that you can send out some signal?
Well, they are pretty soundproof, but the helicopters make a lot of noise. If you've ever been under one of them, it's basically deafening. And the fact that they're flying over, I would certainly hope that if they were healthy enough to hear it and to get out of the snow cave, they would have done so by now. The fact that they haven't is not a great sign, but there's still a chance that they're out there.
All right, Matthew, if you'll stay with us for a moment, we'll be right back with you shortly. Let's go back to Matthew Weaver. Matthew is a former Portland mountain rescuer. Matthew, is there any way to describe the disappointment that most of those searchers must feel tonight? I mean, you know, in fact, even those of us who have been following it for the last 9, 10, 11 days, what a disappointment. One man found dead. Oh,
definitely. It's a really emotional thing. I mean, you're around the families. You put your heart and soul into it. It's a physical exertion to get up and do what they do every day. They're getting very little sleep, and so they're just beyond exhaustion right now. And to get to this snow cave where they knew somebody was, and to find that person dead, is really just a draining and frustrating emotional experience.
Matthew, you should see the mixture of emails I get. On the one hand, I get those who admire the men and think, you know, the beauty and how majestic it is out on Mount Hood and how glorious to be out in nature. On the other hand, I get those who say, you know, what were they thinking climbing Mount Hood, the north side, which is almost sheer ice, almost vertical, in such dangerous conditions. What do you say to these emailers?
Well, you know, that's something you hear a lot, and you hear that along with the taxpayer issues and all that. There's a lot of misinformation about all these issues out there. Climbing Mount Hood, if done properly with the right equipment and the right training, is really not terribly dangerous. I mean, the mountain, there's some 10,000 people that attempt Mount Hood every year, and only on average one person dies a year. Now, obviously, in this case, we have one already, and I hope not two more. But, you know, with that many people climbing the mountain every year, it's really amazing that there's not more problems than that. So, you know, you've got people who hunt and fish. There's people who die doing that. I don't think that it's necessarily any worse to climb a mountain than to do any of those other activities, as long as you do it properly.
I guess that many of us are, you know, certainly reminded a week before James Kim out in different situation, out with his family in a car, but froze to death as well. I mean, we're certainly getting a horrible lesson in survival and snow in the past few days.
Right. You know, it's a bit different, the James Kim situation. It's very unfortunate. They drove in on a remote forest road, got stuck, and they were really far from civilization. The contrast here with Mount Hood is Mount Hood is very accessible. There's Timberline Lodge, which is actually on the mountain. There's large cities like Portland, very close to it. You're really not that far from civilization as compared to where James Kim was in Southern Oregon, which is rather remote. In this case, it's just unfortunate that something obviously happened, someone got injured or whatever the case that got them stranded up there, and then the unpredictable weather that Mount Hood brings just hit them hard this week.
Matthew, most of the searchers are volunteers. It's now been 10 or 11 days. Is there a point where we have to worry, then the families even more so, that they're just going to give up? And at what point is that?
Well, give up is not the issue. The issue is running out of people and whether or not they can actually get there. So the teams that are involved in Oregon are from Portland, Corvallis, Eugene, Hood River generally. And they are all volunteer. And when I mean volunteer, it's not just people that we just grabbed off the street or anything. These are people who have training, and it's an accredited rescue group that belongs to the Mountain Rescue Association. So volunteer is kind of a misnomer. Yes, they are volunteers. They're not paid for it, but they also aren't just picked right up off the street. You can't just grab any climber and go up and do a search. So in this case, what we're worried about now is physical exertion of people. They're exhausted. They're tired. They've been doing this for days now. As well as, I hate to say this, but you know, people have to go to work. They have jobs and they need to pay their mortgages as well. So we're fortunate that many of our employers are very good about letting people go out and do these searches. But you know, there's a reality that after a while, you just can't be away from work for 2 weeks searching for somebody.
All right, Matthew, thank you. If you'll stand by.